evening, everybody. It's an absolute great pleasure to be here this evening and to hear some of the stories and motivations behind many of you here, not only students at John Moores. I think we heard from students at the University of Liverpool, students at Edge Hill. Are there any other universities here represented? Shout out the university name. Any other university here? Liverpool, yeah, we've got Liverpool Uni, we've got Edge Hill, we've got John Moores, we've got John Moores, we've got John Moores, I think. Northampton, Huddersfield. Wow, that's fantastic. Well, that's great. That's great, terrific. No, and it's a real privilege. I'm actually going to stand off the stage because the lights are in my eyes a little bit. So it's a real privilege for me to be here, and I'm very grateful to Joseph for inviting me along. He wrote to me over the summer when I was traveling overseas and asked me if I'd come along and tell my life story at this event. And I thought, oh, I better find out a bit more about this before I agree and come along and tell you about myself. And so I met with Joseph and one of the other champions a couple of weeks ago, Sam, that's right, who studied pharmacy at John Moores University. And I was so inspired and so impressed with what they were doing and the way that they were going about it. And I think everything this evening, from the branding of the event to the quality of the engagement and to the hopefully quality of the food later on has been very, very good. So it's a pleasure for me to be here. And I said to Joseph, it's really not my story you want to be hearing about. That you want to be hearing about, it's really your story. And so I was so pleased to hear Joseph's story, and what an incredible, inspirational story to go from the point he described as being homeless and being without an opportunity to access education, to graduating with a first-class degree and working all across the EU. I mean, it's an incredible story, absolutely incredible. But before I introduce our distinguished keynote speaker, who's going to be unstoppable once he gets up, I'm sure, I thought you might like to know a little bit about my why. Because I have a couple of whys that I'll share with you. I mean, one is obviously I've been in the life of education. I was the first in my family to go to university, and it transformed the opportunities that I had in my life. I studied in America. And I didn't have that in my life plan when I grew up. I don't think my parents, had anything like that, in my future when they raised me. And so, education has been utterly transformative for me. But I think, in a more general term, I like a quote from the British writer H.G. Wells, who saw education as the difference between civilization and catastrophe, on the other hand. And I think that's actually quite an important spectrum to keep in mind, because education is not only transformative for us as individuals who are caught up in education or are taking advantage of educational opportunities, it's also something that enriches our whole society and, as a couple of you said, helps ensure that we continue to improve in our life on earth here, and that we bequeath to a later generation a more secure, a more peaceful, a more tolerant, a more diverse a world for them to inherit. And we've got some troubling times ahead of us given global political developments. So education, the difference between catastrophe and civilization. But I have another why as well, and this is a little personal, if you don't mind me sharing a personal story with you. And this concerns my family. We saw a picture of Joseph's family earlier, and I also have two children. I have two boys. And my oldest lad, when he was 7 years old, a couple of years ago, a perfectly healthy kid, loves Liverpool Football Club. He's got a little Scouse accent, unlike his dad. He was struck by a hepatitis, and it knocked out his liver. And we were in Alder Hey, and he was dying. In a matter of days, it had just struck him down, and it was looking pretty grim. And we went over to a specialist centre in Leeds, And they said to us, you know, the only way that we can help to save your son's life is to look at a liver transplant. So, I mean, we didn't know anything about this at all, but we went to bed one Friday night holding our son who was dying, knowing that someone else, somewhere in the UK, would die that evening, and that through their generosity and the brilliant capability of professionals in the National Health Service, that my son's life would be saved. And he received a liver transplant, and he's now 9 years old. He's playing football 3 times a week. He's swimming. And he's optimistic about the future, and he's got a great, you know, hold on life again. So we were extremely fortunate. Now, why am I telling you that, and why is that my second why? Well, you know, obviously I have something very, very precious in my life now that I'm keen to look after and give him every opportunity he can. But the why for me is also about society. It's also about us realizing our potentials as individuals, but also developing a strong sense of community, because my son's life was saved and he's held up today by a fantastic community. I regard the NHS in the UK as the highest expression of our civilization. And the care and the support that we received as a family is the big why I care about the future of this country and the way in which we operate within this nation state. So those are a couple of whys from me.